Old man, take a look at my life, 'cause I'm a lot like you. Oh hey, it's Grayson back here again. Wanted to first off thank all the new subscribers we got to my YouTube channel. Practically tripled my YouTube subscriber base since I started discussing Amberlynn Reid and her situation. Want to really thank Kicking Geese. She linked to my Can Amberlynn Reid just check herself into inpatient care video. Really appreciate that. Really appreciate all of your support for my channel. And I want to keep giving you some good content. And since Amberlynn Reid is something you're interested in, I thought, let me give you some more Amberlynn Reid content. There has been a theme that I have seen in Amberlynn's situation that I haven't really wanted to talk about so much because it requires me to go a little bit into my personal life, a little deeper than maybe my comfort zone is. But some other YouTubers have kind of mentioned it as well, people that have had different struggles in their own lives. There was a YouTuber by the name of Yistervark. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he basically said that it's motivational because, Amberlynn Reid's channel is motivational because she has characteristics that are similar to each of us and maybe the worst sides of ourselves. And Amberlynn is also under a lot of scrutiny that a lot of us would not be under. I have a YouTube channel. There are things in my personal life that, of course, I keep private that I don't talk about on the YouTube channel. But if we were to, each of us possibly reveal as much as Amberlynn does about one of the weakest points in our life, there are things that could come out that would seem like Amberlynn Reid's situation. Obese to Beast, the YouTuber who was supposedly helping Amberlynn, said if he, and this is, I think, third hand from Amberlynn herself, if he were to have gone through his whole weight loss journey with people watching on YouTube, they would have seen him fail time and time and time again. The first area I want to go into of how Amberlynn Reid is like me, that require a little bit of pause, is psychological issues. I don't have the same type of psychological issues, but I do have some psychological issues. I'm gonna admit that I have a condition called Asperger's syndrome. Sometimes they say in Silicon Valley, they call them Aspies, things like that. And that gives me some interesting characteristics in my own personality, makes me prone to be inattentive. I have kind of borderline ADHD. I probably binge eat a bit myself. I was a bit overweight when I was younger, not overweight right now, but not quite where I want to be either. In Amber's case, she has a lot of psychological trauma. She says she has binge eating disorder, food addiction, but what is clear is that she has a lot of psychological trauma. And this is a rather common experience, and it can cause a lot of havoc in people's lives if you had trauma in your childhood. She has mentioned her upbringing and how she tries to make up for the fact that she didn't have much when she was young by getting herself lots of clothes. That's why she goes and does her torrid clothing hauls and feels this constant need and desire to get higher levels of self-love, which in and of itself isn't necessarily bad, but it can become problematic. She has some avoidance characteristics, trying to avoid her problems, trying to avoid facing medical scrutiny over her being 560 pounds. Avoidance is something that I can relate to because I'll sometimes try to avoid things. I had some PTSD and I would try to avoid things that would remind me of what was happening. I'd try to sometimes avoid certain types of medical testing. I've gotten over it. I got some treatment. Helped me quite a bit. Not perfect, but it helped. So those are some things that I can personally relate to in a way. I don't have childhood trauma the way she did, but I did have some trauma later on in my life from an accident. and it can cause that kind of emotional roller coaster, and I can see how that could propel you into wanting to eat, and it can diffuse your best efforts at having a diet or a workout program, things like that. I get fatigued myself. I'll get really fatigued all the time, and then caution kind of gets thrown to the wind. Things I want to do, things I need to do kind of don't get done sometimes. And that would affect, obviously, Amberlynn sticking to these diets. Her emotional eating, she's admitted, her binges are why she goes over her calories, which are tied to this whole causal chain of psychological issues that she really needs to get worked out. She needs to do kind of what I did and seek professional help, go to a professional who understands these kinds of issues, specialized in her type of issue. But her diets, she keeps going on and off diets. She also has a characteristic that I find in myself when I've tried to go on a diet. Obviously, I've never been 560 pounds. I was a bit fat when I was like 10, 12 years old, but I lost it mostly by exercising and like training for the baseball team. And I know that from my own preferences, a lot of the things that people are telling Amberlynn about her dieting are preferences that I kind of would express, like wanting to control calories versus a more restrictive form of eating. That example I brought up of Alan Roberts is saying that she cannot derive further pleasure from food. I'll admit I derive pleasure from food, and if I want to go on a diet, I wouldn't want to necessarily restrict individual foods. I'd want to do something where I'm controlling calories or counting macros, things like that, because I want to have food that I enjoy. I have a big family, had a party yesterday, want to be able to not look so embarrassing at a party, just have less the same food, time restrictive eating, stuff like that, instead of having to restrict, like, you can never have a slice of chocolate cake ever again for the rest of your life. That's a preference that I would express. So Amberlynn is acting in a way that perhaps many of us would act. There's a lot of people, even people that are pretty fit, that talk about the if it fits your macros and don't want to do the clean eating approach. And I can understand psychological triggers, cues, stuff like that, but it is a preference that might be reasonable. The other point is, especially when Amberlynn was considering this Optavia diet, or when she went on it for like 4 days, that she wanted a diet that was more easy to use, something that was simple for her to implement. And I can tell you that I probably have that preference myself. I actually, when I heard about Optavia, I thought to myself, this sounds a lot like a program I've heard of before. And it's because it was. I heard of this program that was advertised on the radio back when I was just getting over my weight problem. It was called Medifast. And Optavia is actually the same company as Medifast. And I thought about going on that program. Never did, but I thought about it because I'm like, okay, the food seems like it might taste good. And it's something that's easy to use, easy to implement. And of course, not necessarily a replacement for a lifestyle change, but that, again, that kind of thing where it's more easy to implement is something that many of us would want to do. And binge eating, I actually sometimes binge eat, and I even binge eat at night sometimes, like Amberlynn Reid does. Sometimes I'll get really down on myself and I'll start eating at night and then go to sleep a couple hours later, just like she describes in her own video. Obviously, my binges aren't too crazy. They probably fit fairly well with the amount of calories I should be consuming each day. Sorry about that. Filming outside. And that dude kind of screwed me up with his motorcycle or whatever. I know somebody commented that I tend to kind of stutter in my videos or stammer and say like a lot. I'm trying to control that. Sometimes it just gets out of control. Sorry to all my viewers. But I'll binge eat sometimes at night, feel guilty about it. It happens to me. And I'll tell you the truth, ever since I got injured in that accident about 2.5 years ago, I've gained some weight. I'm not in the kind of shape I was beforehand. I'm not actually overweight, but it's happened to me. I got emotionally traumatized, had some emotional stuff, couldn't really exercise as much, and I gained some weight. Thank God I didn't actually get overweight. Probably my ADD helps me in staying thin because I'm constantly pacing around the house. So even though I can binge every once in a while, I'll still not be horribly, horribly overweight. Now, another component that goes into Amberlynn's situation is her health and how she's managing her health situation. A lot of criticism about her not having health insurance. We went over that ad nauseum in the last video about inpatient care. Being uninsured, it's probably an ignorance is bliss thing for her. It's an avoidance thing. She avoids going to doctors sometimes, it seems. She avoids going into therapy. I can tell you that when I was going through the throes of my PTSD, I would sometimes avoid things. Particularly, for me, it was more about tests or procedures. Like, I was afraid of going to the dentist. I'm probably going to go to the dentist really soon, but I was afraid of going to the dentist before I went through my treatment for my PTSD. I was afraid of some other testing that the doctors wanted to do to me. Not necessarily because of the outcome, because I thought it was going to be uncomfortable, didn't like the sensation of it. So I can relate to her experience is avoiding the doctor, but I think the difference in my case is that in my heart of hearts I'd want to do it, but my emotions don't let me. But hers, it's a little bit different. So we're not entirely alike on that. But then this issue of when she's uninsured, she's been trying to pursue her weight loss as a self-help thing rather than going to inpatient care, going to medical care. And I can tell you I was uninsured at one point, and I'd try to avoid going to the doctor too because it costs a lot of money. I wanted to be insured, but I couldn't do it financially. But it is a rational response to want to limit your cost when you're uninsured. Being uninsured and not taking the actions to make sure that you are insured and prioritizing that financially if you can do so, that's a different story. And we have gone through that story again ad nauseum. Next, finances. Amberlynn has been criticized a lot for her overspending. She's been spending a lot of money on like wax molds, the torrid clothing, which I said again, it's an emotional super compensation she's admitted, and I can get that a little bit. And that she's in denial about how much money she has and spending her money the right way. And she's just keeps spending all this money on random stuff. Well, I challenge anybody here, if you're making a decent amount of money, even if you're not, there are probably some things you spend on that other people wouldn't want you to spend on. I'm pretty sure I do, like my mom even criticized my monthly Spotify membership, for example, which just gets charged to my credit card. Honestly, I think it's worth it, but she doesn't. And there are things that each of us will have, like our pet financial sin of things we spend money on. We don't realize how much money we're spending on it. I challenge you, just take your credit card statement or your bank statement if you don't use credit cards and give it over to somebody you really know and trust, a friend who will pick apart how much money you're spending on something. And they'll probably tell you, oh no, I wouldn't spend money on that, I wouldn't buy that, I wouldn't do that. But for Amberlynn, because Amberlynn is in the public eye and she is not seen as somebody who has full capacity because of her situation, then we can go and criticize her because of these wax molds and that she's not making those financial priorities in her life. Because all of us probably ignore our financial priorities in favor of satisfaction in the short term. Like if you go to a restaurant and eat rather than stick the money in your IRA for your retirement or something like that, or paying down your debt. We've all done it. Amberlynn, obviously, she's at a different scale because of her situation, but let he who sinned cast the first stone. And I do understand this stuff does get serious, and I understand I probably need to get stuff into control myself. I didn't get myself into like $65,000 of debt coming out of college because I was smart with money. I didn't get myself a little bit overweight because I was smart with diet and exercise. But what I don't have, and Amberlynn Reid has to go through, which I would admit probably be psychologically traumatizing to me, is the public criticism. And this is what we need to understand when dealing with Amberlynn, that she can be at some points the reductio ad absurdum of our own lives and our own consciousness. So I think the biblical principle, let he who sinned cast the first stone, probably makes some sense here. And you do want to, a lot of people have allowed her grace. They've given her grace upon grace, but then there are people that have just kept on going and criticizing. I personally, for one, I hope and pray that Amberlynn Reid gets better. I know their situation is dire. We wouldn't want to see somebody meet their maker sooner than they should because of their decisions. But we tend to micromanage other people's lives more than we do ourselves, and especially if that's a person that we don't trust, or in particular if we don't find them virtuous. Everything for some reason in society, and this is going all the way back throughout history, has been always reduced to matters of morality, whether a person who is eating something is virtuous because they're eating something like that, or not virtuous because of how they manage their money, how much wealth they have, whether they're considered to be a person of esteem. It's a natural tendency that we have in our fallen nature as human beings. But we have to remember that we would want to be forgiven ourselves in those kinds of situations. When we goof, when we do something wrong, we'd want to be forgiven in those kinds of situations. We want to be treated well. We'd also want to, some of us would want to, deep down, if you go past all the visceral stuff, would want to be corrected, would want to be helped by somebody to get over that situation. There are people that are doing that in Amberlynn Reid's life through DMs and stuff like that she's ignoring. Obviously, that's on her. She has her own agency. She's her own person. But it's a matter of the approach. Objective reality is objective reality, but approaches can and do change objective reality. And how you frame things is an approach that has the power to help change somebody's reality. This really isn't about Amberlynn Reid. This is about, you run across a person in your own family who has a problem. How are you going to approach them? How are you going to understand them? You got to understand where they are, what you would do in that situation, how you'd want to be treated. Understand that you should offer grace first. Hope that's been insightful into the Amberlynn Reid situation, give you a little bit of a different angle to look at. Hopefully you'll go and you'll think about some of the things that Amberlynn Reid does in relation to things you do in your life, things people you know, people who are in your sphere of influence do, and it'll give you a better way of looking at people who are different than you and they're struggling with things in their lives. If you like what you saw, like and subscribe. If we get this channel up to 100 subscribers, I will post in the description a old, I guess you can say, fat picture of myself. If you want to see that, smash the subscribe button and tell your friends. I may or may not release that when I do a video about my own personal situation in depth, but if you want to see it sooner, you're going to want to smash that subscribe button. All right, thank you so much. God bless you. Have a great rest of your day.